morning, everybody. Thank you for that introduction. And I just really wanted to start things off today by sharing with you a bit of my story. In 2006, I called my doctor's office on a Monday afternoon after enduring 4 full days of vertigo and nausea and these strange visual symptoms. And the day I went to see my doctor, I was medicated. The night before, I broke down, crying and thrashing on the spare room bed in my parents' home, begging my husband to go to the pharmacy to buy something, anything to make my symptoms go away. He came back from the pharmacy with Gravol and Bonamine, 2 central nervous system depressants recommended by the pharmacist, and I gladly and desperately began to self-medicate. During that appointment, my chief complaint was vertigo, so that's where he remained focused. I remember as part of the assessment, him instructing me to turn my head to one side, hold it there for several seconds, and then whip it to the other side really quickly to see if I would fall or not. And I caught myself before flying into the wall and was therefore told my dizziness must not be that bad. And I thought to myself, was he not listening when I told him how much Gravol I took before coming here? The appointment overall appeared benign. He told me I most likely had an inner ear infection, a virus, to continue taking over-the-counter medications to manage my symptoms, and that I would be fine in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, I called my doctor's office again for another appointment, complaining of the same symptoms, but I was a lot more distressed. I had now been through 2 weeks of daily attacks consisting of various unpleasant symptoms, the most distressing of which were lengthy bouts of vertigo and visual changes. I had pushed myself to work through my symptoms, fearful of what might happen if I took too much time off work, and became an expert at learning how to navigate life through the lens of a kaleidoscope, unbalanced and anxious. Over-the-counter central nervous system depressants became my new friends, but tolerance grew rapidly and they weren't working as well by the end of the second week. My appointment seemed again quite routine. I complained and I cried and I told him I couldn't deal. He considered my concerns seriously and provided a referral to an ear, nose, and throat specialist. I didn't question this decision at the time. In hindsight, I was having a lot of symptoms, but the vertigo was my main complaint. I could work through nausea, and the visual issues only lasted a minute or less when they happened, and sunglasses really helped with bright lights. Any type of headache or head pressure I experienced was so infrequent, I didn't even connect it to the rest. Besides, I was crying a lot. I was ugly crying, and that always gave me a headache. So when I asked what could be causing these symptoms, he told me he thought I might have a condition called Meniere's disease, which is a disorder of the inner ear. And I was given a prescription for Circ as well as a water pill, 2 drugs used to treat Meniere's, and I was sent on my way to wait for my referral. My referral took 6 months, and that diagnosis unfortunately followed me around for quite some time. So this early misdiagnosis sentenced me to nearly 2 years of wrong turns and dead ends under Ontario's health system. First off, the waiting period that we experience between primary care settings and receiving specialist care feels like being thrown overboard during an intense storm without a life preserver. We wait, we try to function, yet our symptoms do not subside, and we often drown. Being misdiagnosed during that time only made things worse. My health became further complicated by the fact I was routinely given medication that I didn't need for a condition that I didn't have. And when I developed side effects to that medication, my symptom profile expanded. I had to discontinue said medication and then was left with no alternative. I continued to work, I have no idea how, and over time, in many ways, I adapted my body to overcompensate for all of the dysfunction that I was feeling. So my muscles became rigid. I anticipated future attacks with cat-like readiness. I was always alert, turned on, aware of what was going on inside of my body, inside and outside, all the time. And this was exhausting. I began to struggle with intense anxiety associated with knowing something was wrong inside my body, but not knowing what that was or how to fix it. And I often wondered if I was having a stroke. I didn't dare socialize or do much else for that matter. I couldn't eat because everything I ate or drank caused an attack. Everything I did seemed to bring on an attack, and all I could manage at the time was work, home, sleep, repeat, and even that was a stretch on a good day. Once I got into to see the ENT, consultation, testing, and diagnosis took several months as well. I had multiple hearing tests, and MRI and ENG, She had even sent me to the allergist down the hall to rule out food allergies. And she kept giving me prescriptions for different water pills and Circ, even though I told her that A, they didn't work, and B, they made me feel worse, and I couldn't afford to feel worse. I had also mentioned to her repeatedly that I had other concerning symptoms, to which she replied, "Those are neurological, and I can't do anything about that." My final appointment was really deflating. My test came back normal. She was at a loss. She said I could have Meniere's disease, but was really hesitant to give me that diagnosis. Something really didn't fit for her either. And so I asked her, "Well, what's next? What do I do?" To which she replied, "Get on with life." And that was it. I remember wandering around downtown Toronto that afternoon in tears, feeling totally defeated. And I wondered, how do I get on with my life when I feel like I'm going to die every day? So that was about a year in at this point, and my mental health was really deteriorating. My body was breaking down. I was now experiencing painful muscle spasms from being so tense and wound up all the time. I was having panic attacks. I began to doubt that what I was experiencing was real. I thought I was going crazy, and I thought everybody else thought I was crazy too. I thought, I'm just alone right now. I'm completely lost. And this was the turning point for me. This is where I decided to take matters into my own hands. And I recognized my privilege in all of this. I have been working in healthcare settings for quite some time as an allied health professional, and I knew the system and how to advocate for myself. I began speaking with other patients, comparing my experiences to theirs, and vestibular migraine had been mentioned to me a few times. I don't know exactly when it hit me, but at some point, everything just started to make perfect sense. I sought out everything and anything I could about migraine, silent migraine, and vestibular migraine. It was actually the first time I heard that migraine could happen without a headache, which was huge for me. I joined many migraine support groups on social media and spoke to others like me. I had found an entire community of people who were like me. And for this first time on the journey that I was on, I felt connected and empowered and hopeful, and started to gain some direction from my new peers. It took me another year, but I found myself in primary care again, advocating for a neurologist referral. I wasn't taking no for an answer. And after enduring more tests, examinations, and a few medication trials, my suspicions were confirmed. I did have chronic migraine. So I'd like to believe that this was a fluke, and that patients are rarely sent in the wrong direction when seeking answers regarding their health concerns. Unfortunately, underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis, as I think many of you know, are commonly experienced by many migraine patients and can significantly impede their efforts to find relief for their symptoms, and in return negatively impacts all areas of our lives. It's been nearly 17 years since I had my first intractable vestibular migraine attack. And throughout that time, I've remained puzzled as to why and how care unfolded for me the way it did. So over the years, I became increasingly unsettled by my experiences of care within Ontario's health system, and that motivated me to pursue academic work in order to secure answers as to why I had these experiences. In social work, a lot of what we do, unfortunately, is just frantically affix band-aids to problems. And I needed more than that. I needed to bring attention to the stories of patients, in particular women whose voices like mine were often subjugated and dismissed. So I was accepted to McMaster University, where I began my research journey. And I came to know of an approach to research called institutional ethnography. And this alternative sociology, which is actually developed by Canadian sociologists, seeks to understand how social problems come to happen as they do. And this really appealed to me for many reasons, but particularly because if we can understand our health system better, how it functions, its policies and procedures, physician training, the discourse that surrounds migraine care, if we can unlock how these institutional complexes are put together, we can identify in real, tangible ways what needs to change. And as we all know, universally, migraine care really needs to change. So today, while my migraines are somewhat under control with treatment compared to when they first began, I still experience regular symptoms and attacks. I made a decision a few years ago that I wouldn't let migraine rule my life again. And I managed to turn my feelings of anxiety and hopelessness and dismissal into feelings of empowerment as I dedicate much of my current work now to bringing attention to the challenges experienced by chronic migraine patients. So for example, this past year, I've spent my time conducting a pilot that explores women's experiences of care as they attempt to secure a diagnosis and treatment for their migraine symptoms. And from this, I'm hoping to publish 2 papers this summer, one that explores patient work as they attempt to secure care in Ontario, as well as a critical ethnography that highlights migraine patients' experiences of dismissal and gaslighting in medical settings, which came up a lot in my interviews. I've previously published a piece advocating for better drug accessibility in Ontario under ODB. I've built my clinical practice around working with those who are struggling with emotional challenges that accompany chronic illness. And I've begun to build a network on social media using the Instagram at Migraine Scholar Canada in order to bring attention to my work, research, and advocacy initiatives that patients can get involved in within their communities as well. So in closing, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this talk today, is that if you're struggling, there is hope. For me, the worst part about having chronic migraine isn't the attacks, it's the dismissal. It's the guilt. It's knowing that I'm being judged or disbelieved. It's the grief I felt over losing my previous life. And I tried pushing through all of that. I tried living in this world that didn't really want me to be part of it. And it wasn't until I decided to create my own migraine inclusive world that I gained some of that power back. In this community, those who are speaking today, patients and allies of patients who are watching today, you're all part of that. And as horrible as my worst migraine attacks are, I'm really grateful to be part of this community and to be here with you today. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Susan. Really an incredible presentation. And I mean, the fact that you published in a peer-reviewed journal about your experience is just amazing, and really continues to bring that awareness and insight that you have that most people from the treatment provider perspective sometimes miss and don't understand. If you could give one piece of advice to all the people who are still in the same or similar journey that you've gone through, what would that one piece of advice be?
I would probably say be very persistent. Don't give up. Like if you know that something is not fitting with your diagnosis, if you know that there's something off or something's not working, don't be afraid to communicate with your healthcare provider. Don't be afraid to try to get a second opinion. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself because no one knows your body better than you do. And that was something that I really had to kind of get comfortable with within myself because I was never a strong advocate for myself. I was always an advocate for other people. So I would say to kind of build yourself up and allow yourself to have those conversations and to disagree at times.
Awesome. So powerful. And this is really everything we're trying to do here is about empowerment. Stand up for yourself, know the evidence, know what's going on, and bring that. Because often many of our primary care colleagues, they don't have a lot of training in this area. And so you taking that initiative is so powerful. I'd really like to thank you for being here and bringing such a powerful presentation and sharing your story. The only way to end stigma in pain and for those who are suffering is to share our stories and not be afraid. And I saw someone on the chat box, hiding it at work and really, doing everything you can to prevent anyone from knowing because it's a sign of weakness. We start having shame and guilt, but stand up and advocate for yourself, empower yourself. And I'm so excited for the over 600 people here listening to your story and hopefully, looking at doing the same thing. So a big thank you to you, Susan, for being here, for sharing your story. and really for being such a powerful advocate for those living with pain.